So this morning I'd like to cover what in the tradition that you're learning about by now, you know the tradition is called Vedanta. Okay? And Vedanta means the end of all knowledge, literally. And it's encapsulated in about 108 different manuscripts called the Upanishads. Most of these manuscripts, or most of these ideas, are the ideas of great rishis or seers. The word rishi means seer. And most of the seers are anonymous. But we know some names like Bhardwaj, Vasishtha, etc. And this week it's been my intention to give you as much of that knowledge in modern terms, in contemporary language. As you saw from the presentations of both John Kabat-Zinn and Rupert Spira, they teach that. We call it non-duality. They teach that. And the practices are pretty simple. What you've learned this week, including the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, yoga, self-awareness, self-reflection, self-inquiry, what goes by the name mindfulness, which is a term that some of us avoid, but it's now there in part of our language, so we can't resist it. So let's call it mindfulness. But it kind of, in me, it conjures up the mind being full of whatever. So the correct terminology would be awarefulness, but that's a clumsy word. And let's use mindfulness. So mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath, mindfulness of mental space, mindfulness, awareness of the web of relationship. All that is part of what usually goes by the name of mindfulness, or what is called vipassana. The original name is vipassana. The Buddha's name is vipassana. And vipassana means insight meditation. So as you do these techniques, and Roger will summarize everything for you before you go home tomorrow. Tomorrow, right? Tomorrow. So he'll summarize everything for you. Everything I say then becomes irrelevant. Okay? This is just a good understanding of what we're doing intellectually. But the intellect is a way to understand reality, but not everybody cares about that. Not everybody cares about science. Some of us do, but you don't need science to know reality, because science itself is an activity in consciousness or awareness. I'm using the two terms synonymously. Consciousness, awareness, being, existence, same word for practical purposes. So what I thought I'd do this morning is start with a sutra, which comes from the manuscript known as the Shiva Sutras. And there are many branches of that as well. A sutra is a short aphorism, a short statement, but if you truly understand that, then it leads to insight. And what in Western spiritual traditions is called revelation. Okay, revelation is something that transforms your way of looking at the world and knowing yourself. And the Shiva Sutras are about 77 of these statements attributed to Shiva, Lord Shiva, who is the first yogi. As you know, the word yoga means union, yuj. Union with the source of all existence, which by now we understand is awareness, consciousness. So here's the sutra. You might want to write it down. I kind of peripherally alluded to it. yesterday or day before. It's all a dream now. Here's the sutra. And this is the Lord Shiva, the first yogi, speaking to the divine feminine as Shakti. And the sutra says, meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of consciousness. So I'll repeat that. Meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of consciousness. So while I was thinking of doing this morning, I also had the idea at some point we can do all the 77 sutras, which would be amazing. Which would be amazing. Okay. So let's start with looking at this one sutra. Just one sutra. Meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. Everything that we call the physical world, everything that we call the physical world, that includes this microphone, these flowers, this carpet, these lights, but this room, the Costa, the golf course, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the galaxies, everything that we call the universe is an experience that we have through our body. Yes or no? Okay. In order to know the universe, you need this thing that we call the body. Remember, the word universe is a human word. Dolphins and dogs and other species don't have that word in their language. So the word universe is a human construct for the experience of all this and all that out there. But we need this in order to have that experience, right? And this is also an experience, right? So let's pick up any object. Let's pick up the object in my hand right now, or this object, which is called a microphone. What is the experience of this object called a microphone? Sound. Okay. Sound first. Can there be an experience that we call sound without hearing? Yes, no. There can't be an experience called sound without hearing, right? What else is there as the experience of this microphone? Color, shape, color, texture, sensation, smell, taste. You put them all together and then you say that's a microphone. There can be no sound without hearing. There can be no color or form or shape without seeing. There can be no, I should rephrase that, there can be no experience of color, shape or form. No experience of sound without hearing. No experience of color, shape or form without that which we call seeing. Now here's something to also remember, that color, shape and form are the same thing. So the difference between my shoes and the carpet is the difference of colors period. And the difference between my shoes and the jeans is the same thing. Difference in the experience of color. We make a distinction of separation because there's a border of what we call experience called color, which is also the same as shape and form. So everything that we call the universe, and we're using the microphone as an example, but we could say a galaxy, a star, or what humans describe as subatomic particles, bosons, electrons, neutrons, protons, shoes. All this is an experience, a perceptual activity given a name and a description. So far, so good? So let's come to conclusion number one, and that conclusion is that anything that has a name, anything that has a name or a description by humans is a mode of knowing and experience in awareness or consciousness. Yes? Anything that can be named has a form or a description is a mode of knowing an experience in consciousness or awareness. Consciousness being the knowing element in every experience. When Rupert Spira gave his brilliant talk yesterday, he said, what is it that knows your experience of mind, body, and the world? What is it that knows your experience? It's awareness, consciousness. And awareness is the most intimate, therefore, element in every experience. Awareness or consciousness is the most intimate element in every experience. And yet we ignore it. Okay, we are overshadowed by the experience when actually that in which the experience is happening is us as awareness. That's why it's a good idea to take a break once in a while. With all these meditations you're doing, take a break once in a while and just ask yourself, what is it that is having this experience? And then just withdraw or sink into the awareness. Or as John Kabat-Zinn said very beautifully, stop and drop in. Let's do it now. So as you're listening to me, stop, drop in, and be aware. This, then, is the presence in which experience happens. The presence is not in time because it doesn't have a form. We can't taste it or smell it or touch it or see it or hear it, but it is in this presence that all experience arises. And all experience is very evanescent. It arises, falls, arises, falls. The only continuity is the presence. It's called the Sutra Dhara, the sutra, the thread that runs in the midst of all experience. All experience seems to be in time, but actually it is not. All experience is the bubbling up of thoughts and images and sensations and perceptions and a bubbling back into it. So this experience is happening in timeless awareness. It's the only permanent part of you. That's why, and I like to quote the Bhagavad Gita, when they do a cremation, they say, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, fire cannot burn it. It's unborn and it is not subject to death. What is subject to death is the experience you're having. So the principle we've applied to the microphone, we can apply to anything. Those plants, those statues, these lights, stars, galaxies, subatomic particles, these are modes of knowing, given human labels. Actually, there's a Sanskrit expression, nam rupa. Rupa is form, and then nam means name. We give name to a form, and then we call it an object. But as we examine that which we call form, even that is a phenomenon. It's the arising and subsiding of sense perceptions. Now, let's take that a little further back with deconstructing experience. Just as you know this microphone as an experience, you know your body as an experience. This is a hand, this is a body. How do I know it? As sound, as form, as color, as shape. How else do I know it? Okay, so I know this thing that I call my body in the same way as I know this thing that I call microphone, or I call that a light, or I call that a star, moon, Jupiter, whatever. It's a mode of knowing, an experience, in the same way as this is a mode of knowing, an experience. Meditate on your body as the universe. Meditate on your body as the universe. The whole universe is here. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As is the atom, so is the universe. All these names we have given to particles, atoms, molecules, liver, spleen, kidney, brain, even the brain. Because the brain is an experience. Right? How do you know there's something called a brain, or that humans call a brain? It's an experience in the same way as this microphone. Recently there was a very interesting TED talk by a British neuroscientist. It's generated a lot of very interesting conversation across the world. He happens to be of Indian origin, but if you close your eyes and listen to him, he's British, grew up in England. His name is Anil Seth. Anil Seth, and if you want to look at his talk on TED, you can go look at it. And he says, in that talk, he says, our conscious experiences are a controlled hallucination of the brain. A controlled hallucination of the brain. Why? Because all perception is a learned phenomenon. Even, I won't go into that right now, but perception is a learned phenomenon. You're trained to perceive, otherwise you just see colors and you hear sounds and you have experiences of taste, smells and all that. After that, it's a learned phenomenon. And that talk was very brilliant from a neuroscientist point of view, but I wrote to him. I said, if the world is a controlled hallucination of the brain, then why isn't the brain another controlled hallucination of other brains? Is it all a hallucination? And he responded, but there was no really good answer. Okay? There's no physicalist answer to what we're trying to address. Because as Rupert said, even that which we call matter is an experience, a translation, an interpretation of sense perceptions. Okay? So, going back to our sutra, meditate on the body as the universe. Now we already agreed that the body is experienced in the same way as the microphone is experienced. Where do we experience these events that we call the body and the world? We experience them as thoughts. What are thoughts? Thoughts are the interpretations of sense perceptions. Is everybody with me so far? Thoughts are the interpretations of sense perceptions. What's a thought? Now in yoga, a thought is called a vritti. Vritti means a fluctuation or an excitation of consciousness. In fact, the first sutra in Patanjali is Yog Chit Vritti Nirod. Yoga is the settling down of the excitations of consciousness till we get to consciousness itself. Those same excitations disappear in deep sleep, almost. So a thought is an activity of consciousness. If we like what we're experiencing, that's called pleasure. If you dislike what you're experiencing, it's called pain. And then from there we spin off other emotions: joy, suffering, love, compassion, equanimity, guilt, shame, humiliation, depression, anxiety, you name it, anger, hostility, resentments. So basic feeling is I like, I don't like, which is also a thought. So thoughts they spin off as emotions. And what are thoughts and emotions? They are fluctuations of awareness. So just as the universe and the body are perceptions, and mind is the interpretation of perceptions, mind in turn is the fluctuations of consciousness, awareness. Awareness makes the experience possible that we call mind, emotions, body, universe. Awareness modifies itself as thoughts, feelings, emotions, interpretations, seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, sensing, smelling. And that's what we call the universe. So, come back to the sutra. Meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. Is the sutra clear? Okay. So then awareness, as again Rupert also reinforced this, is what we call I. Awareness in common language is what we call I. Because I is the most intimate knowing in every experience. Experience is evanescent, but I is eternal, timeless being. So whether we call it I or awareness or being or consciousness, it's okay. But I think I is the most intimate expression anyway, so why not just say I? And what is me? Me is I, which is eternal, universal, non-local, spaceless, timeless being. I is identifying itself with certain experiences and saying, that's me. Because the me is the ego construct created by I as it identifies with this or that experience. Because our experiences are the result of our conditioning. Parents, culture, economic conditioning, ideologies of all kinds, religions of all kinds, nationality, the whole bit, thousands of years. Okay, so that which I call me is a conditioned aspect of I. So far, also good. So the common language, common expression is I. If you want to use scientific language, you could say consciousness. But in science, by the way, I go to scientific meetings all the time. They spend weeks and weeks and they don't agree on what is the definition of consciousness. So right now, that's called the hard problem of consciousness by scientists. So, but consciousness is a good word. Awareness is a good word if you want to use generic terms. And if you are religious, you can use the word God. Because without that ontological primitive means the most fundamental being or awareness, there's no experience and there's nothing to talk about. So God is another name. The only problem is God is usually defined by religion, and then based on the nuances of definition, people fight and they go to war and all kinds of problems occur. But if we really understand this, then God can't be defined because God is the basis of all definitions, all constructs, all experiences, everything that we call mind, body, universe. In other words, there's only God. And everything else is a description with limited perspectives. So now that we've understood the sutra, let's go into what the Vedanta has described as higher states of consciousness, or what the Vedanta has described as expanded. In fact, the word expanded might be better than higher states. Higher states kind of implies a privileged position when everybody's trying to expand their state of awareness. So the three states that we experience every day are waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Everybody experiences these. Right now, presumably everybody is at least in the waking state. Okay, we're having this experience in awareness. So we don't need to elaborate on this. This is waking state, or what is referred to as waking state. At night then, when we dream, or even by tonight, without dreaming, this will be a dream. I've emphasized that. That's the value of recapitulating every night what happened during the day. That's the value. So by tonight, this will be a dream, even though right now it's a lucid dream. Why is it a lucid dream? Because all experience is passing us by. We are the awareness in which this experience is passing us by. I came into this room and I'm here and I'll leave. So experience is passing us by right now in the presence of being. So this is a lucid dream, but by this evening it will be a real dream. And then when you go to sleep, then another dream will start. And that's the fluctuations of consciousness that are much more frequent, much more rapid, finer. There's a jumbled up story, you're in the story, and it's going on, it doesn't seem to be logical, whatever, but it's the fluctuations of consciousness. And then that'll settle down, and you go into deep sleep, where awareness remains, but the fluctuations are gone. By the way, try an experiment, and maybe we can do it sometime later, and maybe Sarah can do it sometimes in the future. Yoga Nidra. It's the yoga of sleep. So that you realize that even in sleep there is awareness. Awareness cannot go away, because awareness is the nature of the universe. Meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. So sometime we should do that elaborate yoga nidra, but awareness doesn't go away in deep sleep, only the fluctuations go away. There is no conscious experience. But there's awareness. If in the middle of the night something went wrong with your appendix and you had an attack of appendicitis, you would know, right? If in the middle of the night you had a stomach upset, you would know. If in the middle of the night you had chest pain or difficulty breathing, you would know. So awareness functions even without conscious experience. What happens in deep sleep? Experience subsides, so there is no subject-object split. Awareness is there without subject-object split. Without this, there's me and there's someone else. But awareness is there. That's why deep sleep is actually non-local awareness. It's an expanded state of awareness without the experience. But we can wake up to that too. Okay, so these three states are very fundamental states that we go through every day. In Sanskrit, the waking state is called Jagrit. Jagrit Chetna. Chetna is the word in Sanskrit for consciousness. Jagrit means awake. The dream state is called Swapna. Swapna is the Sanskrit word for dreams. And the deep sleep is called Sushupti. Don't have to concern yourself with these words. I'm just using them to show off. Okay, these first three states. Then there's a fourth state that gradually starts to bubble up. And that fourth state is called Turiya. Turiya means going beyond. Or we can say transcendent. Going beyond or transcendent. It's being aware of being aware. Which is the whole purpose of being here this week. If we could just summarize one reason to be here, is you are here to be aware of who you are. We started with that, the first day. Who am I? So the fourth state is being aware of being aware. That's difficult to find. All these meditations, the recapitulation, or just turning. You can't turn back to yourself. You can only sink into yourself. That's why I enjoyed John Kabat-Zinn's stop and drop in. Do it now. This is the fourth state, Turiya. Well, if there is a fourth state, Turiya, is there a fifth state? And those who have explored consciousness say yes, it's called Turiya Tatta. And the best English translation for that is cosmic consciousness. Sounds very grand, but what is cosmic consciousness? It is awareness of awareness, not only here and now in the waking state, but awareness of awareness in sleep, awareness of awareness in dreams. So it is local and non-local awareness at the same time, simultaneously. Which in many traditions, especially in Christian theology, it's called to be in the world and not of it. Now let me backtrack a little bit. As we become aware of being aware, certain things start to happen in our daily experience of life. The first is that we feel peaceful, because the peace of awareness is not tarnished by the experiences unless you identify. And you said, the experience is me. The experience is not you. The experience is a fluctuation that arises and subsides in you. So as we begin to experience awareness of awareness, the first experience is peace. But then other things also start to blossom. Love. Why? Because love is the ground of being that we all share. I is not me. Me is the conditioned I. But I is the ground of being which we all share. So love spontaneously sprouts. Compassion, because the other suffering is felt by me, which is called empathy. So love, compassion, empathy, joy. And then other things also happen. Synchronicity. Why? Because as we explained, this is the ground of non-local correlation, where everything is correlated with everything else. There's also comfort with the unpredictability and uncertainty. As I mentioned, without the addiction of certainty, there's no creativity. So the creativity is hampered by the addiction to certainty and by the need for perceived security. The biggest cause of insecurity is the addiction to security. Right? But if this is the ground of all existence, then this is also the ground of all creativity. In fact, when we use the word God frequently, we use the word creator, creator of all experience. So as you're settling down in this, you have more creativity, you have more love, you have more compassion, you have more joy, you have more peace. And also, you surrender to the wisdom of uncertainty. So you start experiencing meaningful coincidences as well, because of non-local correlation. You start to harness the power of intention, which is called sankalpa. So intention becomes very powerful. In fact, so powerful that all you have to do the intention and everything orchestrates itself around the intention. Everything orchestrates itself around the intention, which we call the law of least effort. Because intention grounded from being has infinite organizing power. It organizes an infinity of space-time events in order to fulfill itself. What interferes with the intention is the camouflaging of I with me and mine. The ego identity interferes. But if it's out of the way, then intention orchestrates its own fulfillment. So even in the fourth state, Turiya, these things start to happen. But in the fifth state, they get magnified. And there's also the loss of the fear of death. And why is there a loss of the fear of death? If the silent witnessing awareness that we call I has now woken up as awareness of awareness in deep sleep and dreams, then there is the realization that I am not the body, I am not the mind. I am that in which the body, mind, and the universe are an experience. That which we call I plays an infinity of roles as a body, mind, but I am not the roles I'm playing. Like a great Shakespearean actor, one day Julius Caesar, one day Mark Antony, one day Cleopatra, whatever. But those are the roles I play, I'm not the roles I'm playing. By the way, great actors have this experience all the time of witnessing awareness, if they're really great. You know, when Ben Kingsley played Mahatma Gandhi, he became celibate, he became a vegetarian, he gave up smoking, gave up booze, and for the time he played that role, he was that role. All the while knowing, and again, I think Rupert Spira talked about John Smith and King Lear, same idea, okay? So now in witnessing awareness, in deep sleep and dreams, there's no fear of death. Death happens to the role you play, not you. And you play multiplicity of roles every day. Father, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, professional, doctor, writer, blogger these days. But those are not who you are. Those are the personalities you assume, and you switch very rapidly from one role to the other, every day. You switch depending on, you take your mask off. The husband mask off, the wife mask off, and now you're the CEO mask. Okay, then you take off that and you're whatever other mask you have, son, father, etc. So in Turiya Tata, the fifth state of consciousness, we have everything that we were experiencing in Turiya, or the fourth state, but more coincidences, more meaning, more love, joy, compassion, empathy, but now also accompanied by the loss of the fear of death. Well, fifth state is called Turiya, then there's a sixth state that automatically unfolds. If you are diligent about being aware, these things unfold spontaneously. So the sixth state is called, in English, it's called divine consciousness. Divine consciousness, if you want to call it, you can call it God consciousness, and if you don't like religious terms, you can just call it refined non-local consciousness. Refined non-local consciousness. In Sanskrit, it's called Bhagavad Chetna. Bhagavad means divine. Okay, so now what is the sixth state? The sixth state is the ever-present witnessing awareness, fully awake, not only in waking, dreaming, and sleeping, but fully awake in the objects of experience. Let me explain that. Object of experience. We already went through why this object of experience is nothing other than a fluctuation called perception, and then the construct called rose. But when the ever-present witnessing awareness is fully awake in that which we call an object, that's called this refined non-local awareness. And I think I shared with you an example of the Buddha's silent lecture when he transmitted this to Ananda, and they both smiled. And he went to, other people went to Ananda and said, "We saw a rose, what did you see?" And Ananda said, "I saw rainbows and sunshine and earth and water. I saw the infinite void. I saw the whole universe in a flower." That's William Blake's poem 2. See eternity in an hour and the whole universe in a flower, something like that. Aldous Huxley wrote about that in The Doors of Perception. He said, when the doors of perception widen, then everything appears to us as it really is, infinite. So when the ever-present witnessing awareness is fully awake in this object and in this so-called subject, but this is, by the way, a so-called subject. This is also an object in awareness, right? That's called Bhagavad Chetna, and this is also called communion. Communion means you don't need to connect with the other, you commune with the other in silence. Because both of you are in presence of presence. So now I shared with you the other day, yesterday I believe, the so-called miraculous. The so-called miraculous is basically synchronicity taken to its ultimate expression. Synchronicity, where thought, manifestation are almost instantaneous. That's what we call a miracle. But the first thing is you understand that the miracle is just a word for what we don't understand. Once we understand it, we usually like to call it science. This is the sixth state of consciousness called Bhagavad Chetna. And then what follows the sixth is the seventh state of consciousness, which is called Brahman or Brahmi Consciousness, where there's both the intellectual and the experiential realization that there is only one awareness. There are innumerable minds, because every mind is a conditioned mind based on interpretation of experience. Parental, cultural, historical, religious, ideological, economic, geographical, on and on. There are innumerable minds, and I'm only talking about the human species. But every species has its own mind structure, which gives it a different experience of the world. You can't even remotely imagine what this room looks like to a chameleon whose eyeballs swivel on two different axes. Or you can't remotely imagine what the experience of a snake is that navigates its experience through infrared radiation, or a honeybee that navigates its experience through ultraviolet, on and on. So that's why Yoga Vasishta says, infinite worlds come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. So we have innumerable minds, but only one awareness. And so the seventh state of consciousness is knowing yourself as the one awareness in which innumerable minds are having perceptual experiences of innumerable universes. And then that's it. So, in spiritual traditions, that's called enlightenment. Nice word, because enlightenment means to be one with the light of awareness. It's the light of awareness that makes all experience possible.